It was meant to be a straightforward trip, cutting through one of those quiet stretches of Alabama, the kind of area folks usually just blow through heading somewhere bigger. General Anika Roberts had done these kinds of drives countless times. No escorts, no sirens, just her, a rented car, and a tight schedule. She had a very private meeting set up at Maxwell Air Force Base, and there was zero room for any delays. But then, somewhere on the road between Mobile and Montgomery, right outside a little speck of a town called Oak Haven, Anika saw the reception bars on her encrypted line start to fade. She absolutely had to make this call, so not later, not in an hour, but right then. She caught sight of a rundown, almost abandoned-looking service station, Betty's Gas and Grub, and swung the car into the bumpy, cracked parking area. It wasn't much to look at, but it would do. Anika pulled over near the side of the place, a bit away from the entrance where a couple of guys were leaning on their pickups, just shooting the breeze in the humid air. It didn't even cross her mind as a problem. For her, it was just a spot to get a moment's peace. She grabbed her secure device, stepped out of the car to get a clearer signal, and put the phone to her ear. "This is General Roberts, identity confirmed, ready for the update," she said, her voice quiet but all business. The officer at headquarters on the other end launched straight into the briefing. "We're talking sensitive troop movements, real-time directives, stuff only a very small circle of people were ever cleared to know about." Anika kept her gaze moving, just casually observing her surroundings like she'd been trained, but her mind was on that call. A couple of people by the gas pumps started to kind of stare her way. You could tell she didn't quite fit the picture of who usually stopped in these parts, and definitely not like someone in a position of authority without any uniform or badge on display. She was dressed in denim pants, simple trainers, a roomy navy blue windbreaker, and a baseball cap shading her close-cropped hair. Just regular clothes, nothing that would make you think high-ranking officer. And that was exactly the way she preferred it. But not everyone was seeing it like that. Inside the station, a woman named Betty Kincaid was peering out from behind the cash register. Early 50s, with a sharp gray bob and the kind of permanent scowl you get from a lifetime of looking down on others. Betty didn't see a decorated war veteran. She didn't even really see a woman simply making a phone call. No, she saw exactly what she expected to see: trouble. Betty reached for the old-fashioned phone on the counter and dialed the Oak Haven Sheriff's Office. She kept her voice hushed so the other customers wouldn't pick up on it. "Yeah, there's some suspicious woman hanging around out here by the pumps," Betty muttered. "Looks real sketchy, maybe on something. Acting weird. Y'all should probably come take a look." She slammed the phone down before they could ask too many questions. On the other side of town, two deputies heard the dispatch and pretty much rolled their eyes. Oak Haven wasn't exactly a hotbed of excitement. They weren't opposed to stirring things up a bit if it meant a break from the usual dull routine. They slipped on their shades, hopped into their patrol car, and gunned it towards Betty's. All this time, Anika was still by her car, trying to stay completely locked into the critical information headquarters was passing along. It was vital, and she couldn't afford any interruptions. Little did she know, serious trouble was already speeding her way. Just as Anika was about to receive her next set of orders, she saw the flicker of emergency lights bouncing off the station's windows, and a cold feeling started to creep in. The patrol cars skidded into the lot, kicking up dust and gravel. Anika lowered her phone for a moment, her eyes narrowed against the flashing red and blue lights. Two deputies jumped out before their car even fully stopped. The bigger one, Deputy Frank Miller, late 30s, crew cut, built like a tank, unsnapped his holster almost instantly. The other one, Deputy Kevin Shaw, was thinner, younger, and looked way too eager to follow suit. They both moved with an aggression that just screamed they were spoiling for a confrontation. Anika felt the whole atmosphere get heavy. She calmly set her secure device down on the hood of the rental and made sure her hands were up where they could see them, palms open. Her voice was steady, even, just like they'd drilled into her at the academy years back. "Good afternoon, officers. Is there something I can help you with?" she asked. Miller just barked, "Let's see some ID, driver's license." Now, Anika took a small step forward, reaching slowly for her wallet in her back pocket. "Of course, my identification is right here. I'm active duty military General Anika Roberts. I'm here on official government business." Shaw just snorted. "A general, huh? You really think we're going to fall for that?" Anika produced her military ID and her federal travel papers, holding them out to the deputies with a firm hand. Miller snatched them, gave them barely a look, then just shook his head. These look phony, he said, flicking her credentials onto the hood like they were garbage. Anika just blinked, a wave of disbelief washing over her. This couldn't be happening. Sir, I can assure you. Quiet, Shaw cut her off. You think you can fool us, lady? You picked the wrong place to try that. A little crowd was starting to gather now. Customers, folks from the station, other drivers who'd pulled in for gas and now figured they'd stay for the unplanned entertainment. A few people were muttering, some were even laughing, but nobody did a thing to help. You know, Anika's training was just screaming at her, calm this down, calm this down. But every fiber of her being knew these guys weren't interested in any explanations. They'd already made up their minds about who she was and, more importantly, who she wasn't in their eyes. Anika tried one more time. Her voice kept steady and low. You need to call your supervisor. You're making a really big mistake. But Deputy Miller, he already had the handcuffs out. Turn around, hands behind your back. Anika didn't budge. She held her ground, not trying to be difficult, but it felt like something heavy just snapped inside her. I am a general in the United States Army, she stated, her voice suddenly sharp, cutting through the air. You are illegally detaining me. Miller actually laughed, a loud, ugly sound that bounced off the gas pumps for everyone watching to hear. Yeah, right, and I'm Santa Claus. Now, turn yourself around. Before Anika could get another word out, Deputy Shaw grabbed her arm hard. Miller twisted her other wrist behind her. The click of the cuffs was sharp, and they bit into her skin. Anika just clenched her teeth, trying to swallow down the wave of pure humiliation that rushed up, hot and sickening. Somewhere behind her, that secure device, the one still linked to headquarters, hit the pavement with a clatter. The voice on the other end, hearing all the noise, started shouting her name. General Roberts! General Roberts! But the deputies either didn't hear it, or maybe they just didn't give a damn. Miller then shoved Anika up against the side of her rental, so hard the car door shook. You could hear people in the small crowd gasp. Got her, Shaw said, like he'd just bagged some kind of trophy. Anika, trying to catch her breath, just stared straight ahead at the dirty window of Betty's Gas and Grub. Her own reflection looked all broken up by the grime. In that moment, she wasn't a general. She wasn't even a real person to them. She was just something they could push around simply because they had the power to. But back at headquarters, things were already going crazy. Anika's sudden silence wouldn't go unnoticed for much longer. Over in the Capitol, that secure call had gone from just odd to seriously alarming in less than a minute. Lieutenant Supervisor Evan Cole, surrounded by a bank of monitors, was staring at the flashing indicator labeled General Roberts, Secure Line. The audio coming through was a total mess. Just background noise, what sounded like a struggle, and voices yelling things he couldn't quite make out. Then, static, nothing. Evan leaned right into his microphone. General Roberts, this is Command Operations. Are you there? General Roberts, please respond. Silence. He looked up at his superior, Major Regina Miles, who was already marching across the operations floor. Track her location, Miles ordered, her voice clear and sharp above the normal buzz of the ops center. Do it now. It only took a few seconds for a tech to pull up a blinking dot on a digital map. It was nowhere close to the base. She was stuck at some gas station just off State Route 113 in Oak Haven, a tiny place most people at headquarters wouldn't have even known existed. Major Miles leaned in over Evan's shoulder, her jaw set tight. Get Maxwell Security on the line and connect me with our legal team. If anything has happened to General Roberts, we are taking immediate action. Meanwhile, back in Oak Haven, Anika was forced to sit on the curb in those cuffs, her back against the station wall. What's your actual name? Shaw asked, standing over her, feeling like a complete nightmare. Who are you really working with? Anika just let out a slow breath through her nose. You have my ID, you have my travel orders. Everything you need to know is right there. Miller just snorted. Lady, you're about 2 seconds from getting booked for obstruction of justice. I wouldn't push it. Anika didn't say a word. She wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of watching her plead. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see people pulling out their cell phones, filming, whispering. And finally, there was the manager, Betty, standing by the doorway with her arms crossed, a smirk on her face like she was enjoying some cheap entertainment. The whole situation felt like it was just spiraling, and not a single person seemed to care enough to try and stop it. Then all of a sudden, Shaw's radio crackled. Dispatch to Unit 5, confirm you have the individual detained. Miller snatched the radio from his belt. Affirmative, it's a woman around 40 being uncooperative. There was another short pause. Then the voice came back, different now. Be advised, that individual has a federal flag. Repeat, subject is federally protected. Headquarters has initiated an emergency contact. Release her immediately and wait for further instructions. You could just see the color drain right out of Miller's face. Shaw's arrogant grin vanished. What in the world? He mumbled. Anika, still sitting there, didn't say anything. She just looked up at them, her gaze steady, just waiting. Miller fumbled for his keys and unlocked the cuffs without even looking her in the eye. He mumbled something under his breath that might have been an apology, or maybe ma'am, but he clearly didn't have the guts to say it properly. Anika got to her feet slowly, rubbing her wrists where the metal had pressed into her. The crowd was completely silent now. Even Betty's smirk was gone. Anika bent down and picked up her secure device from the ground. The screen was cracked. The connection, long dead, sensitive information, possibly out there. She looked straight at both deputies, meeting their eyes directly. "You are going to regret this," she said, her voice low but firm. "Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today." Deputy Miller just opened his mouth like he was actually going to argue. But then a whole new set of flashing lights lit up that parking lot. And believe me, this time it wasn't the local sheriff. It was a line of black SUVs straight from Maxwell Air Force Base. You could hear their tires screeching on the pavement. But General Roberts, she wasn't just sitting around waiting for the cavalry. She was already pulling herself together, focusing on what had to be done. The doors on those black SUVs popped open almost all at once, kind of like you see in movies. But there was nothing flashy about how the security team from the base moved. It was all business, pure urgency. No smiles, no friendly hellos, just quick commands and serious faces. The man in charge was Major Marcus Thorne, early 40s, with sharp eyes that told you he wasn't there to mess around. He strode across that lot, a folder under his arm, and his eyes locked right onto Anika. "General Roberts, are you harmed?" Major Thorne asked, his voice loud enough to carry. Anika just shook her head once. "No, Major, just a few scrapes." The real harm, though, was about to hit their careers, hard. Miller and Shaw started looking really uneasy, like it was just dawning on them how much trouble they were actually in. The other military police quickly formed a kind of protective circle around Anika, putting themselves between her and those Oak Haven deputies without anyone even having to say a word. Major Thorne turned to the local guys, his face like stone. "You are officially ordered to stand down. There's a federal investigation pending. Any other moves you make could be seen as obstructing justice." Miller stammered out something like, "But we didn't realize who she was." "That's no excuse," Thorne cut him right off. "You had her identification right in your hands. You had everything you needed." Deputy Shaw, he tried to act tough for a second longer. Well, she was acting suspiciously. Major Thorne just stared at him for a good long moment, then said real quiet, "You saw a black woman on a phone and you made a call. That decision? It's going to stick with you for the rest of your days." The Air Force team then carefully got Anika into one of their SUVs, making sure she was settled. As they drove off, Anika glanced back just once. It was long enough to see Miller wiping his forehead with a shaky hand, and Betty, the station owner, scurrying back inside her gas and grub like a bug when the lights come on. Inside the SUV, Anika didn't say much. She just looked out the window at the highway stretching on, her mind racing. Major Thorne broke the quiet after a bit. "Headquarters is getting a full investigation going, ma'am. Internal review, Civil Liberties Unit. This is going public, whether Oak Haven wants it to or not." Anika didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't even blink. "They really should have known better," was all she said, plain and simple. Major Thorne just nodded. "Oh, they're about to learn what it's like to be seen for exactly who they are." The SUV sped on past fields and old telephone poles, heading for the Air Force Base, where Anika's rank and her basic dignity would finally be respected again. But Anika knew deep down the real fight was only just starting. And this time, the whole nation was going to be watching. News about what happened blew up on national headlines before Anika even finished her first debrief back at Maxwell. Turns out someone had posted that cell phone video online. It was shaky, a bit grainy, but it clearly showed two Oak Haven deputies handcuffing a woman who was calmly telling them she was a U.S. Army general. No yelling from her, no resisting. Just that awful, unmistakable look of someone being completely stripped of their dignity by people too full of themselves to see the truth. That video spread like wildfire. By the next morning, Oak Haven wasn't just some tiny dot on an Alabama map anymore. It was ground zero for a growing national outrage. The news channels played the story over and over. Commentators were on TV, just shaking their heads, disgusted. Civil rights leaders were calling it a textbook case of racial profiling and an abuse of power. Even veterans groups, who usually try to stay out of these kinds of things, put out statements demanding justice for General Roberts. Back in Oak Haven, the sheriff's office was desperately trying to do damage control. Sheriff Roy Hendricks, a guy who looked more comfortable hunting than facing a bunch of reporters, stood there in front of all the cameras, sweat literally dripping from under his hat. "We, regret this misunderstanding," he mumbled, not really looking anyone in the eye. "The officers involved? They've been put on administrative leave while we do a full review." But a young reporter from Birmingham wasn't having it and cut him off. "Sheriff Hendricks, how could trained officers not recognize official military credentials when they were clearly shown? And was race a factor in what you're calling a misunderstanding?" Hendricks just kind of stumbled over his words, muttering something about high tensions and mistaken identity. But honestly, everyone watching knew the department was trapped. They had no good answers. Meanwhile, Miller and Shaw had gone completely quiet. Their names got leaked within hours, plastered all over the news, social media, you name it. Then anonymous sources from inside the department started talking, revealing that both of them had a history of complaints, using too much force, racial profiling, stuff that had been quietly swept under the rug before. But not this time. Civil rights lawyers from Atlanta and the Capitol filed official federal complaints for Anika. The Department of Justice itself opened its own separate investigation. Even the Alabama governor spoke up, calling what happened an appalling injustice against a true national hero. This wasn't just about Anika anymore, you see. It was about every single person who'd ever been doubted or dismissed or treated badly because of the uniform they weren't wearing, or the color of their skin, or just some wrong idea someone else jumped to. At Maxwell, Anika was in constant briefings with her lawyers, officials from headquarters. Even a senior government liaison was calling for updates. And through it all, she answered every single question with that same steady, controlled voice she'd used to command her troops in actual war zones. But you know, when she was finally alone in her own room, the quiet sort of pressed in on her, and the real weight of it all just settled hard on her chest. Not because she was shocked by it, not really, but because after all those medals, all that time she'd served, all the sacrifices she'd made in that dusty parking lot in Oak Haven, none of it seemed to have counted for a thing. Still, Anika hadn't built her life by backing down from a fight, and she definitely wasn't going to start now. But if General Roberts was going to say something, she knew it had to be her way, her words, not just for her own sake, but for every single person out there who'd felt small and unseen, watching from the sidelines. The press conference was set for noon on a Saturday, right outside the main gates of Maxwell Air Force Base. You could already see the cameras all lined up, a frantic jumble of them. Microphones were piled up, 2, sometimes 3 deep. Reporters were muttering into their phones. The air itself felt hot, heavy, like it was buzzing with this different kind of energy. The kind that tells you something big is about to go down. General Anika Roberts stood there at the podium. She was in her full dress uniform, the first time in months. You could see her medals shining against that deep blue fabric. Her shoulders were straight, her gaze was steady. She wasn't there to put on a show. She wasn't there to make anyone feel comfortable. Major Marcus Thorne stood a little off to her side, arms folded, just watching over her. A few serious-looking senior officials from headquarters were there with him. They'd actually offered Anika some carefully prepared notes, diplomatic ways to say things, a safe way to navigate it all. She'd politely said, "No, thank you." When Anika finally started to speak, her voice was so clear it cut right through any street noise, every click of a camera. "I am General Anika Roberts," she began. "I have given 28 years of my life serving this nation, leading our soldiers, advising presidents, and defending the very ideals written into our Constitution. The other day in Oak Haven, Alabama, none of that mattered." She paused just for a beat, letting her words really sink into that thick air. "I was judged not by who I am as a person, not by the uniform I've worked so hard to earn, but by the color of my skin and the wrong ideas people had about me because of it." Reporters were just scribbling like mad, but Anika wasn't really talking to them. She was talking to all the folks who'd seen that video, the ones who felt that familiar ache in their own gut, that sharp memory of a time they were doubted or put down or just brushed aside. "I'm not standing here today looking for an apology," she said. "I'm here because staying silent is simply not an option. Accountability is important. Respect is important. Basic human dignity is important. And none of those things are up for debate just because of someone's prejudice or someone else's ignorance. Behind all the cameras, people from the local community had started to gather. Black families, veterans, even students holding up signs they'd made by hand. Anika caught little glimpses of their faces. Some looked angry, some looked hopeful. All of them, though, were waiting for something they probably hadn't seen nearly enough of: real leadership. Injustice isn't anything new, Anika went on, but things only start to change when enough good people refuse to just look the other way. She finished her speech without any big dramatic flourishes, no practiced catchphrases, just the plain truth. I wasn't the one humiliated that day. They were. And history is going to remember it exactly that way. Then she just stepped back from the microphone, didn't even wait for questions. The applause, it started kind of small, just a few claps from the crowd, but then it grew and grew into something real, something powerful and alive. As she walked back towards the base, Anika didn't speed up or slow down. She just moved with that same steady way she always had, one foot in front of the other, carrying a lot more than just her own story on her shoulders. Because she knew the world doesn't change in a day. It might not even change completely in her lifetime. But maybe, just maybe, it would change a little bit, all because she refused to be silent. And you know, when you're treated unfairly, your voice truly is the strongest tool you have. You've got to speak your truth, even if your hands are trembling when you do it. Someone out there really needs to see the strength you're showing.